Can everybody see that?
Yes, sir.
All right. So today we want to talk a little bit about listing systems, and this is going to be a very high level type training. We're going to go very not super in depth, but give you guys kind of a system that you can take each step that we're going to talk about today and make it work for your market. Every market's going to be a little bit different on what that's going to look like, but we wanted to give you guys the tools so that you can literally take this step by step and then build it for your market so it works. Um, the first thing I want to talk about a little bit is why you need a system before you take a listing. All too often in real estate, I see so many agents that will get excited. They have a listing and then they put it on the MLS and then they ask the question, okay, now what do I do? If you have a really set system in place, it does a couple things first for you. It does a couple things for you. First of all, it gives you the opportunity to not miss steps along the way. And more importantly, when you have a solidified system and you're in a listing appointment with a potential seller, it makes you sound like an expert. And I'm going to get more into that a little bit as we go through this. Um, but the other thing it does is it helps you negotiate your listing fee a lot better. And the reason for that is when you, one thing about listing fees is in order to get less resistance and get the seller to agree to it and sign, you have to make it look affordable. Now, there's only two ways to make a listing fee look affordable. And the first one is to lower your fee lower than anybody else in the market. But ultimately, that's not what we want to do because that's how you're going to just make less money. Ultimately, long term, it's going to be really hard to grow your business if you're competing with your competition on price. So, what I would recommend you do is build such a strong listing system that when you're in a listing appointment with your seller, your full fee feels cheap because it's such an in-depth system that you've built for their listing. So obviously the first step, this is kind of a no duh type thing, but you need to have a system in place. And so I would highly recommend that before you sit down for your next listing appointment, take these things and write, step one, write all these steps out. And then for each one, come up with a plan for each step on what it looks like in your market. That way, over time, this is going to be a dynamic document. It's not going to be set in stone. You're not going to work on this one time and it's going to be good to go. You're going to need to work on it over time. But the first step is just having that written down so you know where you're at and you can improve it over time. One of the big things I'm really huge on is small improvements over a long period of time will equal big results. So have a system written down. It's fine if you change it, but if you don't write it down, that's when you're going to be all over the place. The other thing about this is utilize this system not only for you, because it's how you're going to put a listing in the MLS and do all the marketing. It's how you're not going to miss steps along the way because you're going to do it the same way every time. I'm a huge proponent of it doesn't matter if you're listing $100,000 house or $1 million home. Your system should be the same every time. Now, I do understand, like if you're listing a bare lot, that might be a little bit different. Obviously do what makes sense for your business math, but try to keep it as consistent as possible along the way. It's just going to give you that upper hand when you're talking to people, and you can say, "Hey, I have a system." A lot of people have a marketing system that they talk about. When you have a listing presentation, a lot of agents have a marketing plan, but very few go in talking to their sellers about their entire listing system on what happens step by step. And it's really a great way, especially if you're talking to a seller who is interviewing different agents. It's a great way to differentiate yourself on if you have a system for the whole entire process, not just the marketing, because most people have a marketing plan that they'll talk about, but very few people will tell the sellers, this is the whole plan for the listing. The next step, I am a huge believer in MLS input sheets. Now, I understand not every MLS gives you an input sheet, but a lot of your MLSs, if you look at the documents that they provide you, are going to give you an input sheet. Most of the time, what that is a couple of pages that have check mark boxes, fill in the blank, whatever it is. But it's a great way that when you're at right before you go live with the listing, you can take that to the sellers to their house, fill it out. It's a great way that you can get information directly from your sellers. I'm a huge fan personally of having the sellers initial that, because then you're kind of putting the onus on them on, is this what your house is like? You have them review all the remarks and make sure they're good with it, all that type of stuff. You're pushing back on your seller. I have a previous experience with another real estate team. And one of the things that drove me absolutely nuts is the team leader would go take a listing, and then the day before it was supposed to go live, she'd be texting people like, do you know what kind of heating system this was and everything? And it's like, well, none of us went to this listing. We don't, or this listing appointment. We have no idea about this house. How are we supposed to know? And then you start doing this whole guess and check system with, well, if it was in the MLS before, how was it listed? Which does work, but it's so much easier if you, when you're there for the listing appointment, just do the MLS data sheet. If you don't have one, Holly and I are actually working on trying to make a generic one that agents can use for the brokerage, so you have something. The other thing I'm going to say about this input data sheet that I think is kind of an interesting little hack, if you will, if you have someone, you're doing a listing appointment and they're like, hey, I want to think about it, or I need to think about it overnight. I have actually used the listing input sheet to say, I understand you guys want to think about it. I'm not going to be pushy and make you sign a listing contract right now or anything like that. I totally understand it. However, do you mind, can we walk through your house, do a MLS data sheet, check everything off, so that if you do decide to hire me, we're ahead of the game. The one thing that I've noticed that does is it takes the sellers out of just talking to you and walking around the house, and you give them that sheet. They take some ownership in it. They start filling stuff out, and then they initial the bottom. In my experience, there's a higher likelihood then that when they think about it, the next day you call them, they're going to be willing to list with you. And part of it is because very few agents are going to take the time to do that. Because unfortunately, in our industry, the thought process is, if you're not ready to sign a listing contract, I'm not going to waste any more of my time with you. And so it's another way to differentiate yourself. And it's another way to tell your sellers, hey, I've done this before, and I understand that when you want to say go, we're ready to go now. We don't need to come back and do a walkthrough and all that. Like, we're ready to go when you are. And ultimately, if you decide not to list with me, we've wasted a couple minutes to fill out the sheet. I'll throw it away and it's no big deal. So that's one thing I found to do. If you have those sellers that are like, hey, we're not ready to sign yet, we really want to think about it, or we need to interview other agents. So step 4 is photos. Holly and I talked about this yesterday. We are always going to suggest that as agents, you guys are getting professional photos. Now, we totally understand in some markets that's not possible. The other thing we understand is if you have a total dump of a listing, it might not be worth paying a professional photographer. So for this purpose of this, obviously your system should start with, if you're going to do professional photographers, have that worked out in advance. Who are your professional photographers in your area? Build relationships with those people, because I will tell you right now, in my market, I've got a home inspector and a photographer that I've built a pretty good relationship with. And I will almost guarantee you, if I call them up and say, hey, I really am in a pinch here, I need to get photos or I need to get an inspection done, and I'm kind of on a time crunch, they will work me into their schedule because I've built those relationships with those people. So have it in place of who, if you are doing professional photos, who are you going to have do those? Build relationships with them. It will make your life a lot easier when it comes to scheduling. We actually give our home inspector and our photographer Christmas cookies every year, because I want to keep that relationship good, because they will help you out immensely as you work through listings, and also on the buy side too. Second thing is have a plan for your signage. So, once again, are you going to have a company go out and install your signpost and, hang your sign and all that type of stuff? That's not available in every market, so that might not be an option. It might be one of those things where you have to get one of the metal H-frame signs and do it yourself. But have a plan in place so that, once again, when you get the let's go from the seller and it's the listing date, there's a sign in the yard from the beginning. The other thing about signage is understand the rules in your specific MLS about signage. Every MLS is a little bit different on when you can put signs in the yard, if you have to put signs in the yard. Every listing contract is a little different. I will tell you right now, like in South Dakota, part of the listing contract is you have the sellers check if they want to sign. And our MLS has been known to go to listings, and if they don't have a sign, and it's after so many hours after it's been listed, they will send you a fine because you agreed with your sellers to have a sign in the yard. So just know the rules about signage within your market. And then once again, have a plan so that you can, when you're ready to go, just go. Marketing. I think this is a big one. Once again, it's really just about having a plan. How are you going to market your homes? Are you going to use social media? Are you going to use ads? Whatever it is, have a plan in place. And once again, this is a big one where for me, I'm a huge proponent of do the same marketing every time. The other thing that I'm big on with marketing is having like a weekly report that you send to your sellers on the marketing. So you're every week communicating with your sellers on, how many views did you get in MLS? How many views did you get on social media? How many views did you get on Zillow? Were people saving the properties? What was the communication like with agents that were booking showings? All of those type of things. And that's one thing that I will tell my sellers in a listing appointment. Like once a week, you're going to get an email from me that's going to break down what we're doing to market your property. Part of this is setting the expectation for your sellers because let's face it, especially right now with the way the market is, we're seeing more price drops than ever. And the number one place that you're going to hit resistance on a price drop when you go to a seller is they're going to tell you, well, you're just not marketing my property, so we don't want to drop the price. If you're sending them these reports every week and showing them, hey, we had 3,000 views on social media, the MLS had 500 views, we had 1,000 views on Zillow, and 100 people saved the property on Zillow, and we got no showings, you probably have a pricing issue. It's a lot more powerful to go into a talking about a price reduction if you have that data. If you just go in there and say, hey, we're not getting any activity on the property, we need to drop the price, they're probably going to come back and say, well, what are you doing to try to get in front of people? And that's where I think having a marketing plan and setting the expectations with your sellers is huge. In my opinion and in my experience, if you set that expectation, sellers understand. Like if you explain to them how a CMA works and the fact that you make a CMA one day, it could be obsolete the very next day. They understand if you're like, hey, we missed the mark here, we need to adjust for market conditions because we're not seeing any activity. They understand that. But if you don't set that expectation early within your listing appointment, it's going to cause you a lot of problems. That's when you get very upset sellers, especially in the current market where, let's face it, emotions are already elevated in this market. Everybody's a little jumpy because rates are high and we've got a lot of stagnation going on. So the marketing, the biggest thing is have a system, communicate that with your sellers, and then also have a system to relay that data back to your sellers on whatever, it doesn't have to be weekly. If you want to do it every 2 weeks, that's fine too. I have, with the lots I have listed right now in South Dakota, I've told my sellers, what do you want? And they're like, once a month is fine. So just have those conversations because it will really help your life out down the road. Listing input. Now, the big thing with this one is if you're working with a TC or a virtual assistant or somebody else is putting your listings in the MLS, having a conversation with them of, hey, what is the process for me to get the data for the listing to you so you can put it in the MLS? If you're doing it yourself, it's not as big of a deal. But once again, having a system in place so that when you have a conversation with your TC and they say, hey, I need X, Y, and Z from you in order to put this in the MLS. It's going to help you with a smoother transaction. It's also going to make you look way more professional to your sellers because you can prep your sellers in the listing appointment. Hey, I work with a transaction coordinator. So once we start going on this, you're going to get communication from her or him or your assistant or whoever it is. It just gets everybody on the same page and it really solidifies, once again, you being a professional in this situation, and it makes you look like a veteran real estate agent. One of the biggest things, if you don't have these things and every time you go to your sellers, you're acting like this never happened before, it really kind of makes you look like a rookie. So if you, once again, have these systems in place, it makes you look way more professional and your sellers are going to be a lot happier. The other big thing that I talk with my sellers is how are you going to handle showings? Um, and are you going to use showing time? Do they need to approve it? Obviously, if the house is vacant, it's a little bit easier. Are there specific days that need to be blocked out? The other thing, and Holly alluded to this just the other day, what are the rules in your MLS regarding delayed showings? And how can you put things in the MLS before you can allow showings? All that type of stuff. This is also where like the coming soon listings, if your MLS offers that, is that something you want to look at? But having this conversation, because once again, I've personally I've done this before. I launched a listing. I never had a conversation with the sellers about how we were going to do this. We got a showing request right away. I call them and they're like, we're not ready. Well, let me call the wife and make sure it's okay. And then you're delaying that response back to the agent on the other side, which once again is making you look like, a rookie, where if you just have all these things in place, you can have it set up through showing time. So the seller has to approve it, or they give you the authority just to say yes. It works out much better. So have a plan in place on how these showings are going to be handled. The other big one that I like to talk to my sellers about is how agent feedback is going to be handled. And also explaining to them is sometimes we're not going to get feedback, and that just happens. I don't know if you guys are familiar. I think it was about 2 years ago, there was a big court case that came out of Arizona where an agent actually gave feedback and ended up getting sued over it. Maybe we could do that for a True Crime Tuesday. But ever since then, there's been a lot of hesitation on agents' parts to give feedback when it comes to a listing. And so I will now tell that story to my sellers and say, look, I'm obviously, as your listing agent, I'm going to try to get feedback because I do believe that it's very valuable. But understand, we're not always going to get it. Some agents are lazy. A lot of agents are going to show this house to somebody that they've signed a one-day buyer agency with. They're not interested, and you're never going to talk to that agent again. We won't ever know why they didn't like the house, or if it was one of those things that had nothing to do with the house. Um, so the other thing that I will do too is I will ask my sellers, do you want me to tell you the agent feedback? How do you want me to approach that? And the reason I do that is one time I listed a house and I got some feedback that, in my opinion, wasn't that big of a deal. I told it to my seller without having this conversation, and she flipped out. I mean, she hired a cleaner. They went like crazy with cleaning the house because one person said that they smelled something in the house. And my seller ended up freaking out, hiring a cleaning company, going, ripping the house apart, trying to figure out what the smell was. And looking back on that, I totally could have mitigated that by saying, look, some people are going to say stuff. I wouldn't put it at face value until we start getting multiple, feedback things that are in that same thing. But have those conversations, because I've had some sellers say, what, I don't want to know about it. I don't want to know about the feedback. I just want you to, tell me kind of the generalized, overall what was going on with the feedback, but I don't want individual examples. Um, I worked with one seller that was like, I don't have time for that. So you just worry about it and take care of it. So have those conversations with your sellers before you start getting feedback, because once again, you don't want to be behind the eight ball. Okay, this is one that um, I've chosen to do this in my listing presentations, and that's talk about how price cuts are going to be handled if we need to. Now, I totally get it. Some agents don't want to talk about this, and it's because they feel like, if you bring up a price cut in the listing presentation, the sellers are automatically going to say, well, we haven't even had it listed. You're already talking about dropping the price. Me personally, the way that I discuss this is I say, hey, look, obviously we don't want to do a price drop. Our goal is to hit the market at the right price, get it sold, and move on. However, especially in the market right now, statistically speaking, that might be a problem. We might have to do that to find that sweet spot because we just don't have a lot of data, because there's not a lot of homes sold in the last 6 months. So I will have that conversation with them up front. And the next slide, strategically, I do it in a way where I talk about the price cut and then I talk about multiple offers after the price cut, because I think that will, kind of give them the harsh reality first and then go to the best case scenario next. Um, This is one, if you don't want to talk about it, if you don't feel like, the sellers are going to handle that and it's going to cost you the listing, don't talk about it. But I'm kind of the opinion, just throw it out there on the table, be honest with people, set that expectation early. Um, but what I will do is I will talk about price cuts, and then the very next thing I talk about is multiple offers. And part of that is because this is the best case scenario. If we start getting multiple offers, how do you guys as sellers want that to be handled? Once again, you're now speaking from an area of authority of like, look, I've been through this process before. I understand that this could happen, and we need to talk about how we're going to deal with a multiple offer situation before it happens. And so, I'll have some people that will tell me, you know, just put it on like a multiple offer sheet that we can review. Some people, will say, oh, well, we just want you to just go over everything with us as the offers come in. The other part of talking about this too is talking about when we get one offer, if it has a response time that will allow, do we tell the showings that are going to come before that response time that we have an offer? What do your sellers want you to do? What do they want you to disclose to other agents that are showing the property? Do we want to go back to people who have shown the property before and say, hey, we have an offer with a deadline of this date. If you're interested or your client's interested, we need you to write an offer by this date. Talk about all those things and how they should be handled. I had a listing just a couple years ago when the market was crazy that we had 14 offers in less than, I think it was 36 hours. And fortunately, we'd had this conversation because the market was so nuts, and it really made it very smooth, not only on the seller's end, but it made it very smooth because as I was getting these offers, I could tell buyer's agents, hey, I've already had this conversation with my sellers. This is how we're going to handle this. We have multiple offers. We want your highest and best. We're not going to get into some bidding war. We just want your highest and best. And this is how we're going to handle it. And the one thing that it did for me at the end of that transaction is I had the buyer's agent who was great to work with call me up and say, you know what, the way you handled that actually made me feel like you knew what you were really doing. And I knew I just, wasn't going to be able to walk all over you with inspections and all that type of stuff. And so not only does it make you look like a professional to your sellers, but the buyer's agents on the other side, it gives you that level of authority and that level of professionalism that, once again, this isn't my first rodeo. I've been there, done that. Let's get this thing done in the smoothest way possible. And then, how will offers be handled? So this is kind of more or less presented. Let's say we don't have multiple offers. Do you want me to present? Do you guys want to sit down around the dining room table and talk about an offer? Do you want to talk about it on the phone? What do you want? Just having those conversations, because once again, it's so much easier to have that conversation before it comes in than get an offer and then call your sellers and be like, I got an offer. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? It makes you look like you really don't know what you're doing. Where if you say, hey, we had this conversation during the listing appointment, this is how we're going to handle offers. It once again just makes everything so much smoother because you've set that expectation. And then finally, how are repair negotiations going to be handled? And this is a great time too to show off your authority and your knowledge of the current market. When you're in a listing appointment, to say, hey, if we have negotiations and we have one offer, this is where the market's at. You guys as sellers might have to kind of come to the table and negotiate a little bit. You might do some repairs that, 4 years ago you wouldn't have to do, but that's where we're at. So how do you want to handle those things? And ultimately, this is also when you can start talking about how the sellers are going to be, coordinating with contractors and all those type of things. You can give them a vendor list of people that are certified to do the work that you've worked with before, all those type of things. Once again, just giving yourself that level of professionalism as you go. Get this thing sold. So I didn't realize this, but step 13, I probably should have put 14 because I think that's bad luck to have 13 steps, but that's all I got for today. I think Holly was going to jump in on some stuff. So are there any questions? Does anybody have any questions or anything?
I just want to say that was amazing, Josh, and also 13 is my lucky number, so good job.
I did not know that, but I will say that I did it on purpose then.
Yeah. No, I think you covered all the caveats. I think this was a really good, like he said, overview. So we're going to do an overview of like buyers next, and then we'll continue over 2026 to like get into the nitty gritty on all this. And just know like we don't know everything. We're coming to you with our experiences, right? So we welcome ideas and things, tips and tricks and stuff from everybody, right? So just know that as we continue to make everyone better and level up our game, we're definitely going to talk about, CMAs for your sellers and your buyers, which are comparative market analysis, evaluation, seller net sheets, and how to do those. There's just so much training. I can't cover it all in one day, but we're really excited to like build out our library and our academy. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. We have some exciting announcements for that. I didn't interrupt you, Josh. I see you, Debbie. Give me 1 second. I didn't interrupt you, Josh, because you did great. I told you all my caveats and you kind of added them in, sprinkled them in. So we will be getting you an MLS input sheeted generic one. The reason that's challenging to do is because each MLS asks different questions. And you want to so the best thing you can do is go in and act like you're entering a listing and see what your MLS is asking and literally just copy and paste the questions and answers. So we can help over time create those. And then we'll talk more about what our transaction coordination team will do for you. But giving them some type of MLS input sheet is very important. It's one thing when you have your own assistant who you're paying to do the search and find method, but our TC is going to need you to hand them something on a silver platter, like this is what I want you to put in the boxes. So that's all I have. Debbie, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, there's many of us have been in this for years, some have not. I've always, and this was amazing, Josh. I mean, it's go back to the baby steps and go move forward. We get busy, we go through life, we go through our career, and we got okay. Well, I've got this. I know how to do this, and you just move on. You kind of rush through it sometimes or whatever. I've never in my entire career of 20 years not sat down and had a system. I mean, I've only recently started using a VA last few years. I knew what to do. I knew what I was doing, but I didn't really have a system. And this to me is amazing. Starting people off, starting agents off, or starting all over and going to the first step and going forward and don't make any change, adjust it somewhat. But this is amazing, Josh. I mean, I'm over here going, yep, yep. But I'm like, that's great to have this conversation, all the conversations up front.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it reminded me too, which I put in the chat, like I had a seller literally offended and
Yeah.
sad because I told the feedback and in which I didn't ask like, do you want feedback every week or do you want feedback every day? And so I learned a big lesson from that because I didn't know my sellers would be sad from flooring. Like literally, there was a gap in the floor and I was like, "Oh, it's because of this that the buyer decided to, go with another home." And they like started crying and they were offended. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I learned a big lesson." So I was like, would you prefer to do once a month? Tell you, what's very, very important to like what's very important to you. And so, yeah, I learned a big lesson. So that was a good reminder.
There is, I did have a conversation with my coach on this, and he said there's two different feedbacks that agents need to be prepared for or start thinking about. We are getting the feedback from the other agent. What was your opinion and all that? That's for us. Use a price, and then you've got the feedback from the buyers, and it's always just an opinion. So if you have to preface it that way, okay, or do you want the feedback from the agent, or do you really want to know the little itty bitty comments that the buyer is going to make about the house? Because it really is probably most time irrelevant. It's just their opinion, what they're going through the house. So there's two ways to look at it and figure out
I
which one.
agree with that, Debbie. And
Yeah.
I would also add, if you're representing the buyer and you're
Mm-hmm.
giving any feedback to the listing agent, um, definitely specify whether that's coming from you or the buyer. And if it's coming from the buyer, make sure you have permission to give that feedback, just like what Josh was talking about with
Mm-hmm.
that lawsuit and stuff. But again, we'll do a whole other training all about that. But just think about anytime you're disclosing information that your client gives you. Just think about it from that aspect. But I just want to give a quick again, Josh, that training, again, I was learning things
Yeah.
too. not necessarily learning things, but just like, holy shit, I should be doing this. I
Mhm.
should be doing this in my listing appointments. And it's like a duh thing. So it doesn't matter
Mm-mm.
how long you've been in the business or how new you are, right? We should all be unafraid to learn. And I can't tell you guys once again how proud I am to be building the brokerage I wish that I had when I
Mhm.
was a brand new agent. Nobody taught me this shit.
Oh,
I had a brand new listing at $320,000, which I had to figure out how to price. And then I come in with the paperwork and I'm like, what do I do next? And nobody's helping me. So we are here for you. We're here to help you.
mhm.
Anybody else got anything? I just had to say that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was just gonna see what else we had in the
Here's
comments.
I did a Christmas red.
Oh, I like it.
Oh, I love it. I need to, yeah, send me the info.
Yeah, Alicia, great idea. She said we should cover mindset for new and pre-licensed agents and contribute, and she has things to contribute about tips and ideas. Awesome. So, I'm excited because we have Alicia and Rose, and we've been talking about, again, we haven't formally announced anything, but we're working on our GPS program for new licensees or like people who haven't maybe taken a listing in a while and how to like re-up that. And so we're excited to work closely with Alicia and Rose as we build these systems for new licensees, because some of us can try to dig way back in the memory, like what was I questioned? What was I trying to do? But building it in real time with them, I think is gonna be, what really sets us apart. So,
I
Hey,
love
Josh,
it.
Holly,
yeah.
real quick. Sandy Lynn brought something up that I wanted, like having these systems in place aren't just seller centric. Like have a
Mm-mm.
system for your buyers too, because, talking about if you guys give me feedback, am I allowed to tell that to the listing agent? That's gold. Once again, on the buyer side of things, you're solidifying your position as a person of authority within that specific market, because it gives you an opportunity to kind of say, hey, I've dealt with these problems before, so let's deal with them now before they happen. So I'm huge on systems. I think one of my real estate mentor people that I really look up to, he was so big on if you want to scale and grow a real estate business, you can't do it without systems in place. And so, this isn't just a seller thing. Have systems in place for every part of your business, especially when it comes to dealing with the clients that you're working with in that business.
Yep,
Amen.
yep.
All right. Well, I hope you all join us tomorrow, Thursday, December 4th, for our company-wide meeting. We've got lots of exciting news to bring you, updates, things we've rolled out. So with
And
that,
tonight is our My Rico reveal at 8 p.m. Central. If you have any agents that you would like to introduce to the company, feel free to let them know to tune in on, we do it live every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Central on Twitch. And I always say when we're presenting, if somebody told you to tune in, it means they think the hell out of you. It means they think you're a hell of an agent because we are invite only, right? And we protect our culture. So I just wanted to make that plug. Sorry, Holly. Go ahead.
no, you're great. That's why I usually just wait for you to say, okay, Holly, close this out.
All right, Holly, close us out.
All right, when in doubt, reach out and message us if you need us. We are here for you. We all started this morning with a blank slate at 0. So make sure you go out today and talk to a buyer, a seller, or an agent. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.